So this is a video about how to create a sketch note of a vacation. So what you can see on the screen here is a quick sketch note that I produced from a recent trip that I took with some friends to Cairns. I created it on my iPad using an Apple Pencil in the app Procreate. And I'm going to break down in this video my thought process, some of the techniques that I've used to create this visual. This one's a pretty simple sketch note. I haven't included a lot of detail because it's more to show you the how you go about thinking this process through. Hopefully you'll be able to see how you could take this and then use the same thinking and the same approach to create a much more detailed sketch note if that is what you are looking for. But today, this is really just about the kind of breakdown of what am I thinking, what are the steps that I'm taking, what order do I do these things in, that sort of thing, so that you have the underlying process that you could then pick up and use for your own sketch note. Now, if sketchnoting is new to you, as you can see, it is a great way of note taking that uses a combination of visuals and words to create a really memorable record of something that you've seen, heard, or experienced. And so here is an example of how you might do that for a holiday. Okay, so breaking down the first step, I knew that I was away for 3 full days. I flew in the day before, flew out the day after. So my first thinking is, how do I structure this page to represent that structure of my trip? So as you can see here, I start by just sketching this out on one layer. So it's going to flick over to this in a second and you'll see. So I start with a rough sketch of what are the pieces and where are they going to go. So I know I want to put a title, so I'm putting that box there. I know I've got the 3 full days, so I'm giving each of those a little bit of space on the page. Intentionally making them a bit straight and not straight, a bit wonky, because I like that. When it's hand-drawn and it's imperfect, I think it has more life to it. So I know I have the fly in, fly out, so I've created a bubble for that, and I know I'm going to put some sort of fancy detail around the edge. I don't know what that looks like yet, so that's a squiggle. So now I've jumped up to a fresh layer and I'm starting with my title. So I'm drawing that in. That's giving me my first space. Now I'm jumping up another layer again and I'm starting with my first full day. So I've put a title on that day and I'm now going through and I made a list. I did this on Post-its before I started. I made a list of the top kind of 3 or 4 activities that we did on each of these days. And now I'm going through writing in the text for those activities. So as you can see, I'm using a bit of a zigzag pattern down that square. So starting on the left, then starting on the right, then starting on the left again, because I think it just gives it more visual interest and I don't want it to look like a list. So getting each of those in, as you can see, I write the text in a size that's comfortable for me to write in, and then I minimize the box down to the size I want it to be. So I come up another layer again to go for my next day, which is Saturday, following the exact same pattern. There's something magical that happens when you repeat patterns in sketch notes. It gives them a style and a uniformity. Even if your writing isn't that neat, even if your icons aren't that great, the uniformity of layout and color and font holds it all together. It makes it look polished. So working through, same process here, getting down my key points that I want to cover for the next day, writing it in font in a size that's comfortable for my hand, and then minimizing it down to the size I want it to be. Another layer up again, and we're doing the 3rd full day. And I've stuck to about 3 or 4 main points for each day as a way to just really keep it at that high level. Like this is a sketch note of the highlights of the trip, not a detailed account of everything I thought, did, said. I've chosen the layer of detail that I want to go into, and that's a choice you have when you approach a sketch note, is exactly how much detail do I want to go into and where and why. I could have included key quotes of funny conversations that we had in each of these places. That might have been another layer I could have gone to. but I've chosen to keep this one simple. So that's a decision you get to make every time you sketchnote, is how deep do I want to go here, and what's the sort of detail I'm going to include. Now, up another layer again, I've put this layer just above the text layer for Friday. I'm now going through and just sketching in the outline of an icon for each of those points. So I'm trying to keep it simple. Every time I wrote down something that we did, I'm now giving that something a very simple icon. And these are things that they're very simplified drawings of the things in my head when I think about this thing that we did. So I'm just, again, keeping the pattern very simple, trying to keep the amount of detail fairly consistent from icon to icon, and just capturing the essence of that particular thing in as fewer lines as I can. That's the idea with drawing in icons, is they shouldn't be overly detailed. They should be pretty simple. So again, each day, on Saturday, on Sunday, I've come up a layer and I'm adding this picture layer just above the text layer for that day, following my pattern through. Now, I'm playing around with a background color, because I didn't want the background to be white for this, because the trip to Cairns just felt like it was so full of color, with the blues of the water and the green of all of the forest and trees. It felt like it needed a colored background, so I've settled on that very pale tealy bluey green color. And then I've come underneath my text and picture layers to add in these containers. So as you can see, I've given each of the days a white box, and I've come in and done this after I've added these layers underneath, once I know what size those containers need to be to hold the content. So rough out the rough layout first, do the content, then come back in underneath and add the containers. That's the approach that I use. And it's one of the benefits of doing these things digitally, is that you can come and add layers underneath. Now, I've just added a very simple plain icon in that top left and bottom right, because those were my this is where I flew in, that's where I flew out represented moments on the page, and I've just given that a very simple dotted line through, which is just a very simple way of kind of giving your eyes an order to follow. Our eyes want to start top left anyway, so we're going to follow that grey dotted line, and it's going to take us through Friday, through Saturday, through Sunday, and then out to that last plane. Just gives our brain and our eyes a through line, a place to follow. So I knew I wanted to put a little bit of detail in those border areas around the outside. So my thinking was, think of Cairns, what comes to mind? We were outside the whole time, so I've put the sun, and just the beautiful trees in the forests are really what's staying in my mind. So I've just added some treetops along the bottom there and a bit of a vine hanging down the side. Now, as you can see, one of the very last steps that I'm now doing is I'm coming back through and actually adding color onto these icons. So I'm coloring them in very simply, block colors, and then I'm coming to a layer underneath the coloring layer to put a colored circle in the background. And again, this is just a little container to help hold the icon. It just gives it some presence on the page, rather than this icon just kind of floating in space. So I could have just stopped at the little yellow car, but instead I've come back in underneath and added an orange circle under there, because it just holds the space better. I hope that makes sense to you. It makes sense in my mind. So this coloring in I'm doing under the layer of the outline, and I'm just using the paintbrush tool in Procreate to do that. So I always use the same outline pen. I just change the size to do my black outlines and my text. And then I tend to use the paintbrush tool or the fill tool to color things in. Final little pieces of detail. I just came through and put a little drawing pin in the top of each of those pages to make it look like I went and stuck those notes on the page. And then one last thought there is I changed it from my trip to our trip, because that felt like a better representation. So again, when you draw digitally, you can come back through and change your mind about things like that, and make those changes quite simply. So that is my very high level, quick run through on how I created a sketch note of this holiday or vacation. If you found this useful or interesting, I'd love to hear about it. Please comment below. Let me know what you liked. If you've got questions, if there's things you'd like to know more about, I'd love to hear about them. So please put that in a comment below. If you are new to the channel, it would mean an awful lot to me if you hit subscribe, and please put a like on the video. It helps let YouTube know to show my video to more people, which really does mean a lot. So thank you very much for watching my sketchnoting your vacation video. I'll see you again soon.